Hello and welcome to Watches Tonight. This is Watchbox Studios. I am your host, Tim Masso. This evening, I survey the watch market for certain popular models. You know their names. We chat live and I share viewer wrist shots tonight on Watches Tonight. Spare a thought for the folks who make these pictures possible. TheWatchbox.com. 3,000 late model pre-owned and vintage watches up right now. We update several times per day and we are global, so don't be surprised if we're updating at 1 a.m. your time. The ultimate in insomnia entertainment. Also, check me out on Instagram. Tim_Masso, all video reviews all the time, updated multiple times per week. I try to post at least 3 new videos a day. These tend to be selections too, not general stuff that you see on Watchbox Studios, but the cream of the crop. MB&F Mad 1, Resonance Type 1, Yellow Gold Royal Oak Jumbo, Diamond Set Patek 3970. It gets better. Every single day, video updates. Tim_Masso on Instagram. All right, let's see who's in the box. Joe Tyson from Apex, North Carolina. Enrique Cassiano. We've got Jean-Claude Beaver. Caliber YQG. Mateo C. We've got Guillaume joining from Vancouver. Eric Nielsen from Asheville, North Carolina. First in the box, Edward Ledden of Sweden. We got Wachusiast staying up late in Dubai, and Joe Pinto from Louisville, and James Fernandez from Denver. I've had a lot of friends and families from Denver. That's a good town. Scott Wexland is our local boy from Westchester, Pennsylvania. Okay, so guys, viewer wrist shots, always a highlight. Yours on mine. We're starting off with Simon T, who complains I haven't featured him. Simon, your wish is granted. Showing good taste with his Vacheron Constantin Overseas, which, spoiler alert, is in the show, and Glendronach. We've got David R. and his Lange Söhne moon phase doubling up on Deutschland with Mercedes-Benz in the background. We've got Dr. Chow and his Watchbox bought Patek Philippe 5205 annual calendar, taking on the workday. Thank you for trusting our company. We got Rick R. of the American Midwest, who hits the water with his Milgauss white on rubber B strap. That is a great color combo. He even color matched the dial of the watch to the deck of his boat. I love the details. Dana A impresses with his Patek Philippe 5170P chronograph at a pre-Emmy event. And Fred P and his white gold Patek Aquanaut ride the surf in Beach Haven, New Jersey. The Boardwalk Empire at your feet. All right, guys, send your wrist shots to Monday Mailbag at thewatchbox.com to see yours on mine. So today's watch marketplace and used watch prices. We had a viewer, Robbie T, who originally asked me a question about the Vacheron Overseas, and I thought this would be a really good show theme since we don't do market wrap anymore, and frankly the watch markets have moved and not in the same direction over the last couple of months. So let's talk about where prices have gone from the top when oftentimes there is no place to go but down. So the question was about the Vacheron Constantin Overseas self-winding, which is the basic automatic model. 41 millimeters, stainless steel, 3 hands and a date. 3rd generation Overseas came out in 2016, and for the first time since the Overseas arrived in 1996, it really was a match for the rivals from Patek and Audemars Piguet, not just in terms of pricing, but in terms of actual feature sets and refinements. So this is an interesting topic since we watched the Overseas in recent months become the last Holy Trinity sports watch to see its values spike, and now it is the first one to see a really pronounced pullback in values. So let's talk about how the market has moderated since roughly late February, which coincidentally was just before the Russian invasion of Ukraine and really does seem to be the fulcrum point for the changes we're seeing in the market. So for now, the most sought blue dial Overseas seems to have settled around $50,000. Add or subtract $5,000 based on age, warranty, condition, and accessories, and you get a sense of where this watch is right now. You could pay under 50, you could pay over 50, but that's going to be the real pivot point for pricing. I should also mention that this is a watch that's down about $20,000 from its peak 5 months ago. So if you can think of where things were in February, this watch was climbing to $65,000, $68,000, $70,000, and that specifically refers to the blue dial model. There are others, and we'll talk about them in a moment, but it was the blue dial watch that was starting to trade at about 50% of what a steel Nautilus 5711 was trading at the time. So let's talk about where we are right now. We're going to look at all of the primary dial variants. The silver dial model is easily the most attainable. Keep in mind that in stainless steel, every version of this watch currently retails for $22,500, but the blue dial version is a boutique exclusive. So this watch right now is somewhere between about $32,000 and $38,000. The watch has been on the market since 2016, so you're going to find a broad range of remaining warranties, conditions, and boxed sets. Vacheron boxed sets are quite appealing, so if you are missing items, the watch is going to cost less, but typically between $32,000 and $37,000, $38 is where you're going to see these priced right now. Also important to note the black dial overseas. A lot of folks think that this is the most striking version, and I'm not going to argue with them. Certainly the contrast between dial and the case is the most abrupt. This is a watch, again, same retail price as the others, but you're going to see it trading between $40,000 to $50,000, or $40,000 to $45,000, I should say. You'll pay about $40,000 to $45,000. One of the reasons, and it's not just down to the attractiveness of the watch, which is considerable, but it's down to the fact that this one's been on the market for less time. The standard blue dial, silver dial, and brown dial arrived in 2016. This didn't actually come out until 2018, so it's had less time to populate the market. Again, $40,000 to $45,000 is what you're going to pay if you want to own one of these right now. I would also say that even though it's not part of the canon, really no one considers gold versions of these integrated bracelet sports watches to be mainstream. If you want to add rose gold to your overseas, you're going to have to add about $70,000 to the current price of a blue dial model. Now, while the result is certainly attractive, it's also more scratch prone, a little bit more fragile, and might attract the wrong kind of attention in this day and age. But still, about $120,000 if you want the blue dial in rose gold. So, if you know and love the third generation overseas, then you're already wondering about my obvious omission, which is the chestnut brown dial Vacheron that opened the segment. That was my hero image for the Vacheron brand when we opened. This is my favorite version of the third generation overseas. It's also one of the least common. I have yet to see an example here at Watchbox, and I see somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 watches a year at this company. All of which is to say it was very infrequently ordered and it's infrequently sold. When it does sell, it tends to sell between collectors, but that's not to say there aren't a few on the market at any given time. Today, these sit between the black dial and the blue dial watches in value, and I suspect that in the long term and with the benefit of hindsight, collectors will make this variant the most valuable version of the steel third generation overseas. Rarity, charisma, instant recognizability, and its tendency to defy trends in the market equate to a very desirable watch 10, 15, 20 years down the road. Okay, let's see who else is in the box now. We've got Justin D joining in. We've got Ron H from Sydney, Australia, getting up early with us. Butik 1 from Poland. Cull Obsidian staying up late in London. We got Dylan Lamb. And Dylan, you're in the show tonight. Mark S., a local boy up I-95 from Brooklyn. We've got Brian S. from Norway, another one of our late nighters. We've got Kunik from Berlin and continental Europe, and Robert H., who says he purchased the blue dial overseas 2 Christmases ago for $19,500. Loved it then, love it now, will love it in the future, no matter the value, and that is what I love to hear. We got a question from Chris G. Thoughts on an everyday white dial beater for under $10,000? Every once in a while you can still find the white dial Milgauss for less than 10, though it's not always common. There are quite a few white dial Blancpain Le Mans watches. Now they're water resistant and they're loomed and they're automatic and they're steel, but they're not super shock tolerant. There are a lot of white dial Omegas out there, and I would have to say that the white dial ceramic dial Seamaster Diver 300 meter is going to be your winner at around $5,400. It's going to leave a lot of money in your beater budget to have the watch serviced and possibly polished down the line after you beat it, or more money for adventures out and about with your new Omega. So that would be my recommendation if you're looking for a beater under $10,000. We have Art Marks saying, love the haircut, Tim. Aha, you see, that's the thing. It's not cut, and that's why it looks the way it does. All right, what's going on? We got Eric R. asking thoughts on the Romain Gaultier HM and HMS. I like them, but considering the lack of mechanism, I really prefer the Insight micro rotor. If you're looking at a Romain Gaultier that's not a logical one, and I can understand why you would for size reasons, take a look at the Insight. It's still a very wearable watch, and I think it's more beautiful than the hour minute and the hour minute second. That's just my advice, having experienced everything Romain Gaultier has ever made. Okay, wrist shots. Number 2, I asked, you answered. Bernard S. of Singapore takes a classic wrist shot right here with his Watchbox bought Omega Ed White. Looking good, and thank you for trusting our company. Ari F. beats the summer heat with his Glasuta Original CQ Panorama date in the pool, cooling off in the heat of summer. Adrian and his Omega Aquaterra Small Seconds watch the World Series of Poker firsthand in Las Vegas. Small seconds and high stakes. Okay, Tobias L. and his Grand Seiko White Birch send salutations from Phuket, Thailand. And Eric N. captures his newly arrived Datejust 41, his toy, with Jack the dog playing with his favorite toy. Send your wrist shots to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com, and remember, when you do, send me your Instagram handle so we can tag you appropriately. Okay, so our hobby's most famous market, football. The Patek Philippe Nautilus market was already overheated back in the year 2019. That year I wrote an article for Quill and Pad, which you can still read, noting that the steel 5711 had more than doubled in price from retail to pre-owned. At that time, I meant a used price between $60,000 and $70,000, which seemed a little bit inflated. A little bit. Man, I wish I could buy one for that now. Add the speculative distortions that followed the pandemic, and chaos would later reign. Too much accumulated cash from too many easy money moves by central banks, combined with too many people with too much money shopping from home, and we essentially got where we were early this year, or for that matter, at the end of last year. They were equally insane where the 5711 was involved. The Patek Philippe in 2021 was all about the Nautilus, as Terry Stern announced that the 5711 had begun to overshadow the brand, about which he was 100% correct, and the 5711 would be phased out. That created even more of a frenzy as folks realized this was their last opportunity to own the watch new. Plus, I should really say, and the green dial arrived early in the year as a sort of run-out model. This was the Dash 14 variant, and the Tiffany signed dials would be available later in the year in a limited edition of 170 pieces. The green dial sent things crazy to the point that we wound up seeing auction prices at Antiquorum in July of 2021, just a year ago, at $500,000. I think the price was $490,000, but given this watch's retail price of around 35 grand, it was shocking. Until December, when somebody paid the shocking sum of $6.5 million for one of the Tiffany dial limited editions. And again, I don't think 170 is a very small edition number for a watch like this. That sounded kind of, I don't know, prolific by the standards of these things, but all the same, $6.5 million watch. Now, it was for charity, but still. Watches made by Breguet himself. Tourbillon watches with exotic escapements, again made by the master's own hand, have sold for millions less than that Tiffany dial Nautilus, which makes me wonder where the priorities of watch collectors are, and whether watch collectors are really even the people buying these $500,000 and $6.5 million Nautili. So these sales cumulatively raised huge questions about the historical literacy, priorities, and tastes of the wealthiest watch collectors. Furthermore, questions arise concerning the impact of mainstream media coverage and the entry of general public non-enthusiasts into the watch market, especially for this type of watch, which is now a status symbol that even people who know nothing about watches will recognize as readily as a Rolex. So, where do we stand in July of 2022? Well, let's take a look right here. We got our blue dial, green dial, and our silver white dial Nautilus in steel for your review. Unlike the situation with steel Rolex or even the Vacheron Overseas, we're not seeing huge pullbacks on the 5711 just yet. It has a higher profile and a larger potential buyer pool than the Vacheron, and discontinuation of the model is keeping prices firm for now. The cornerstone blue dial Nautilus might be down about $25,000 from its peak, but for every $125,000 watch that we see out on the market, there's another somewhere else still listed at $150,000. So it's not clear that people are paying a whole lot less money, but I will say that we're starting to see some lower asks. So there are signs that the market is cooling. This isn't a collapse, but it is a cooling, and it's the opposite of what we saw this time last year, so it's notable. It's not so much the fact that we've seen 21 to 28% pullbacks on some of these watches. It's the fact that we're not seeing increases in value anymore. So, silver dial models have softened a bit more, and 20% slides from February prices here are very real. This is where you're going to see those 28, 30% price slides from what people were paying in February. But we're not seeing a clear break in the fever yet for the green dial Dash 14 model, which you can see is still advertised everywhere for up to $500,000. I would say that a realistic price for this watch is probably going to be just under 500 grand, but we're seeing prices at or even above what someone paid at that Antiquorum auction in July of 2021. So this market hasn't corrected, not yet. Scarcity and hype have seen to that. As for the Tiffany dial Dash 18, honestly, who knows? There's so few of them out there. I suppose you might be able to have one from the UAE for $4 million, but then again, that doesn't look like a photo of real inventory, so your guess is as good as mine. You pay the man, and then you hope he can find the watch. So, viewer wrist shots number 3. Sean P. of the UK. Where's his dark rhodium yachtmaster behind the wheel of his Benz? We've had a couple of Benz shots tonight. Kevin D gives us our second Grand Seiko white birch sighting with a Honda to match. We've had a couple of folks keeping it all German here. We have all Japanese craftsmanship. Anthony H. Where's his G-Shock GBD H1000 at the summit of Snowdon in North Wales, and that might be our best pure photograph of the night. I think that wins our photography award among the wrist shots. Seb A and Ralph the dog admire his vintage 1990s Royal Oak 56-175. That's the 33 millimeter. Sam L showcases his watch box bought tungsten bezel Breitling Galactic Unitime Sleek T. Sam, thank you for trusting our company. And Eric O successfully trials a rubber bee strap on his Tudor Black Bay 58 at Lake Tahoe. Guys, keep them coming. Send your wrist shots to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com and include your Instagram handle so we can tag you. Okay, what's going on right here? Purity of essence. Sarcastically, no doubt, saying 500,000 is a steal. No, 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 it's steel. See what I did there? We have Brick Lane joining in. Welcome, Brick Lane. We have Mark S. asking, Tim, what do you think of Allied Cycle Works? I think those are the guys making carbon fiber bikes in Arkansas. I would say if you're considering that, also consider True Custom Carbon, because there's a couple of American manufacturers like Holland and Appleman who will make you full custom carbon. And I'm trying to remember the name of the company in Colorado. Is it Argonaut that's doing full custom carbon there? But there is one there as well. I would say before you buy a stock-sized frame, and I don't know if Allied does custom, but there are a lot of custom builders right now, and you have many options. Just remember that. I've only named a couple of them. That said, I've seen the Allied frames, and they look nicely made. Their paintwork seems to be good, which isn't always a given at a new manufacturer, and I haven't heard of a bunch of frame failures. That was a big thing with Guru bikes back in the day. It's always nice to hear a bike is a little bit overbuilt rather than underbuilt, especially when it's made of a frangible material. Geezer joining in from London. What else is going on here? Abdul from Germany joining in. What do you think of the new Tudor Ranger, the affordable Explorer? Well, it really does look like between the Tudor Black Bay GMT, the Black Bay Pro GMT, and the new Ranger, all of the best Rolex vintage tribute watches are being made by Tudor. And with a price in the low 3,000s, high 2,000s, I think, depending on whether you get it on a strap or a bracelet, the price on the new Ranger is right. We got Matthias L joining in from Chile. Welcome, guys. And Philip Marceau from Montreal, the old home of Guru Cycles. That's a fact, and I do miss them all the same. I like their titanium bikes most. Okay, Rolex Daytonas, the canary in the coal mine for the whole watch market. Steel Rolex went nuts during the pandemic, and its speculative aftermath. Remember, everything. Too many people cooped up buying watches online. Too many people with too much money to spend, and with stop-start production thanks to coronavirus at a lot of watch factories, there were even fewer watches available. It was a perfect storm recipe that turned an erstwhile $13,150 Rolex watch into a $50,000 speculative commodity. So, where are we now? Well, remember, historically, the Daytona has been the Rolex watch with the longest line of potential customers. Back in the early 90s even, the steel Daytona in its original automatic iteration was a waitlisted and highly coveted watch, and people were paying over list even then. But that's not to say Rolex necessarily sells more Daytonas than GMT's subs or, God help us, Datejusts. It just means that relative to demand, the steel Daytona has passed through periods of acute scarcity more frequently than the other models, which admittedly sell in somewhat higher volumes. So back in February, we're seeing quite a few of those $50,000 sales, or at least a lot of $50,000 asks, and it moved very, very quickly, because I remember that going up from about $40,000 in October of 2021. So in the space of basically 1.5 quarters, or 1 2/3 quarters, we saw a watch increase in value from an already inflated 40 grand to 50 grand. 25% price hikes that occur virtually overnight are not sustainable. In other words, pricing was unreasonable and riding for a fall. Today, the marketplace has stabilized, with used examples of the latest Daytona priced between about $33,000 and $39,000, again, depending on age, price, boxed set, and of course, whether or not the watch has a white or a black dial, and this does appear to be a thing. A few notes about these. First, the white dial outperforms the black dial. I'm not sure why this is, because I personally prefer the black dial, but maybe people like the contrast. I will say there are more examples of the white dial floating around, and in spite of that, they do seem to command higher prices, so a rare instance of a watch being both more common and more valuable. I would also say that the price gap between the white dial and the black dial tends to be $3,000 to $6,000 pre-owned. Examples sold around $30,000 right now are well documented, but they tend to be compromised examples that are either the very oldest, in rough condition, or not fully documented, or not accompanied by a full boxed set. Remember, this is still a mass-produced watch, so you will find them online. It's not like that Tiffany dial Patek where you're wondering, does anyone have real inventory? There's a lot of real inventory in late model Rolex Daytona floating around, which means if you've got the money, you can absolutely get a great example that looks indistinguishable from new with the full boxed set, still under warranty. Those $30,000 watches are kind of the ones that scrape the bottom of the barrel and force you to make compromises that just aren't worth the discount. I'll also say this. The price of the watch has increased notably new, and we're talking about the new price now, from about $13,150 3 years ago to $14,500, and that's the new price as of 2022, which means we are seeing the Rolex price creep at something of a quicker rate than we've seen in the past. So that is helping to prop up prices, and I don't think we'll ever be able to get this watch anywhere near like $20,000, $25,000. I think the market still has a way to go. There is a little bit of deflation that still has to be priced in. After all, we haven't seen any real major market recessions yet, and it does seem like at least a few of them are on the way, but I don't think you'll ever be able to get this watch within $10,000 of its retail price. I think there will always be enough demand and enough scarcity, plus enough periodic creep of Rolex new retail prices to support this one and to prevent the bottom from falling out. Okay, viewer wrist shots number 4. Dylan L. takes his IWC Pilot's Watch chronograph Spitfire to see Top Gun Maverick. Mikhail B. of Poland takes his Seiko Predator, also known as the Arnold Schwarzenegger, for a hike in Norway's Lofton Islands. Adam R. and his Rolex Explorer conquer Mount Whitney during a 17-hour one-day hike. Brady P. and his Breitling Premier chronograph sample NATO tactical style, that is a NATO strap for his Premier, and Brad C. and Abe the Horse go for a ride with a 5-digit Rolex Submariner. Looking good, Abe, looking good. Send your shots to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com, and please include your Instagram tag. So, what do I think about buying any of these watches that are actually decreasing in value? Well, first of all, look at it for the long haul. I don't think that anyone who's looking at a watch as a long-term investment perceives long-term to be 6 to 24 months. These are watches to buy and hold long-term, and I'm not going to completely reprise the segment I did in our last show, but watches are still a good long-term store of value. Don't try to play the role of a speculator. If you look at these things as NFTs or Tesla stock, yeah, you're probably going to get yourself in more trouble than watches are worth. Ultimately, just investing in the S&P 500 or real estate is probably going to make you more money. But in terms of buying good watches and keeping them long-term, you have nothing to fear. That's how I buy my watches. I buy them to keep. I keep them long-term, and sometimes I give them away to friends and family. But look at a Rolex in terms of its service life, about 300 years. If you keep the watch for even 10% of its potential service life, it won't matter whether you bought the watch at 35 or 25. In the long run, this is a good way and a fun way to spend your money if you want something that's a store of value second and a source of pleasure first. Okay. How about a watch that's gaining value? Surprisingly, there are a few. Now, you probably saw the recent auction season, so I don't need to go over where independents are heading these days. If they're RM, if they're Grunefeld, if they're FP Journe, the direction is mostly up. But how about a big group brand that's actually doing well? Well, not across the board, but Lange Söhne has a couple of core models that are finding newfound respect, and the Lange Zeitwerk has enjoyed a formidable rally over the last 5 years. You see, that is a sustainable trend. It's not a bubble surge that increased post-pandemic. This is something that's been happening for half a decade now, and in my opinion, this is backlogged respect that is finally coming due. When this watch came out in 2009, as a German-made watch, it won the Aiguille d'Or at the Swiss GPHG, the Oscars of watchmaking. Again, as a German-made watch, it's a constant force escapement, it's beautifully handmade, it's a jumping digital time display. It is all of those things, and at 42 millimeters in white gold, it's a nice size, not too big, not too small, just enough to act as a canvas for that movement, which is the true highlight of the watch. So back in 2017, it was common for the core white gold reference 140029 that you see right here to sell for $51,000 to $55,000 with a full set and ideal pre-owned condition. Even then, that pricing reflected tens of thousands of dollars over its roughly $80,000 retail price at the time, and used dealers would take care to not inventory more than 2 to 3 of them because they were slow selling and difficult to market. So its retail price of around $89,000 is receiving a lot more respect from pre-owned markets today, which no longer discount this model immensely. You can see that really high 80s is the going rate if you want to buy one of these. These are not the extremes. These are not the high highs or the low lows. And they represent true value. This is a watch that's neither going to gain nor really lose after you buy it. And I think that's a nice sense of stability to have when you buy a watch, yes, first for the pleasure, but also knowing that this is not like a purebred dog or a trip to Europe. This is going to create wonderful memories and have some lingering value for the owner. It's not just the memories by themselves. That seems logical. The respect for this watch is driven by substance. Consider the movement. It's an all-time great. Now, that's not even a really good photo of the caliber L0431, the basic Zeitwerk constant force jump hour, but it's got the best of everything. Black polish, sharp interior angles, freehand engraving, German silver, blued screws, polished screws, and much, much, much more. How about that stopworks on top of the barrel? Gorgeous. When compared to Patek's hybrid mass production of the 5711 or Rolex's fully mechanized production process, this Lange takes immensely more human energy and attention to build. Few sites in watchmaking match that GPHG winning Lange caliber L0431, which, as you can see, fills the case back, fully justifying the 42 millimeter size of this watch, and it's got a wonderfully pleasing slow beat rate, just like a dotograph. I'd even go so far as to say that haute horlogerie collectors obsessively probing the far reaches of the internet for the next rock star independent watchmaker can find exactly what they're seeking from a Lange that's been around for over a decade. Scarcity, deference to tradition, beautiful hand finishing, and innovation. All of those you might associate with a brand like FP Journe or De Bethune or Moritz Grossman. But the reality is you can get it from a big brand, a group brand, a brand that's been around longer than most of the independents and will be around to service this watch and provide parts forever. I think a lot of what we love about the independent brands is embodied in this Zeitwerk. Even though it's not an independent brand, Lange, at least to my eye, still operates like one. Okay guys, thank you so much for joining in. I want to thank Sid and Sean for making the magic happen on the switchers. I will not be here next Monday. I'm going to my friend's wedding over in Seattle. That's a bit of a trek. I'm going to be best man, which is a good fortune for me because this is not going to be routine. I will never be best man again, and I will never be at my best friend's wedding again. So we're going to make it special, take a little extra time. I'm going to have to miss that Monday show, and I'm very sorry for that. But thanks to all of you who make the best job in the watch world possible. Thanks to everyone who joined in the chat. Time out, Tim out. Thank you for logging on.